Welcome back to Tales from the Soundtrack podcast. Today we have a pretty interesting and spontaneous series of episodes we thought would be fun to chat about. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtracks.
Yes, sir, the music that filled our youth. Nintendo 64 controllers, PlayStation controllers, sitting in front of a tiny CR television. We're going to cover Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 in this episode, and we are definitely planning on having 3, 4, etc. banger soundtracks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with Colin Otwell from Bearing Point again, down for that. But today we have 1 and 2, which were extremely nostalgic. Dan, I got a shotgun question for you.
Let's do it.
Aside from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack, what's a soundtrack that you heard that inspired you to like a band?
That's a great question. I really have to think about that because there's lots of instances where, whether it be a film soundtrack, video game soundtrack, where I'll, already know most of the artists, and it's, most of the time, they have some throwaway ones. But I would say this is kind of tough, actually. This is a good question. I have to really think about that. Oh, man. You know what? I can't remember the exact game, but there's been a litany of like off-roading, motocross type games. But I remember one in particular. It was the first time I was introduced to Sum 41, and it was before they were like really big over here. They clearly just got a good publishing deal with their label or something. And I remember them being on it. I believe Saliva was on it. But I remember it was the first song I ever heard from Sub 41 and was off their first record, which I believe was also the title track, Makes No Difference. Like, that's a really early Sum 41 song, but like super good. And that was I instantly bought that CD at like FYE.
I remember Saliva being on Aggressive Inline PlayStation 2
They were
game.
on dude,
a few
like
games,
Click
yeah.
Click Boom was used
Yes.
on like every game platform. Like,
Yep.
It was like, oh, the 12 to 16-year-old demographic will eat this.
I will say one of the most this not a video game, but a forum snowboarding video that was back in the day, early 2000s.
Now you're speaking my language.
It was forum snowboarding, The Resistance. I had it on VHS, and it was a Mac Dog production. And that, not that I hadn't heard Twisted Sister, but Twisted Sister was on it. There was other bands that I didn't like really listen to at the time, like Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, Bad Reputation.
Sure.
And then one big one that really opened me up, even though I was big into Social Distortion and stuff like that, was Mike Ness, The Devil and Miss Jones. That song.
Not familiar.
Oh, really? That song I've been listening to since 20 years. I mean, 2002, 2003 is when I really got this soundtrack, or just the VHS itself, like listening to the soundtrack. There was things like the Butthole Surfers and, like stuff like that.
Yes.
Method Man and Red Man.
Man, the 90s skate scene was something else.
Yeah, Fugazi, Twisted Sister, like all that stuff was on this.
God.
Was on this. So if anybody that's listening, Forum, The Resistance, it has snowboarders, Bjorn Lines, Jeremy Jones, Peter Line, old snowboarder videos before probably half the people that are listening to this time. And, check it out. Lots of cool stuff. And then also not even just skateboarding. Aggressive inline rollerblading used to be a big thing 20-something years ago, and it still is in Southern California. There's still crews that I see that are hitting rails and stuff, but the skate video scene was big, and there was a video, another VHS from the company Mind Game, and the video was called Words, and there was it got me into like Local H and stuff like that. Yeah, so a lot of those things 20 plus years ago got me into that stuff.
Man, like I actually have a good point of reference as well. Now the gears are turning. So as I mentioned in the previous episodes, I've mentioned it a couple times. I lived in Europe for about 8 years. I lived in Germany, and there was this really awesome series of skate videos that was out in the mid '90s. The one I'm referencing in particular is just called Europe '95. It had some really, really interesting music on it. So that was the first time in that video that I ever heard No Effects. The Cranberries were on it, Blondie. I also remember like Mob Deep being on there, like old school like '90s skate hip hop. Like it was a time. It was a time.
It was a time. Okay, so let's get back to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Yes.
This game originally came out on PlayStation and Nintendo 64. September 29th, 1999 on
Mm,
PlayStation. If you can believe it, almost 24 years ago.
man, I was a whole fresh like 12 years old.
Yeah. As a child, we were children, and Nintendo 64 itself was the coolest thing that had come out, or PlayStation was the coolest thing.
You know, I did all right. My brothers had a PlayStation. I had the N64.
Yep. Couple months later, March 15th, 2000, Nintendo 64 version came out of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which I still have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, 2, and 3 in cartridges in my
Mm,
possession, and I will
that's
never
wild.
get rid of them.
Yeah, I mainly played those on PlayStation. I was not a huge fan of the controls on the N64 after being used to it on a PlayStation, but that's really it.
I had them for both. I played a lot on PlayStation at friends' houses, but I
Mhm.
had a 64 myself. I still have the same Nintendo 64.
So do I. I still have my original one.
It's amazing that we have to buy adapters just to work with modern televisions just to play those game systems, but
Oh god, it's comical at this point. Or you could pay $200 to have a guy install the actual like HDMI onto the board, but at that point just learn how to fucking solder.
yeah. Yeah.
It's fun. This video game definitely boasted a banger of a soundtrack, and revisiting it has been such a trip, and just like so many like really awesome memories with those songs, because at least for me in this like series of games, like dude, one of my all-time favorite punk rock songs, like Police Truck. Holy shit.
Yeah. Police Truck was one of the biggest ones when I revisited this soundtrack from Dead
Mm,
Kennedys. And it's funny because like Police Truck came out when I was born in 1987.
yeah, exactly. Same.
It's interesting to hear it. There were a couple other ones that I completely forgot that were there,
Yeah.
like the Ernie's.
The Ernie's was that's a song. You know what? One of my favorites was definitely Goldfinger though. Superman, legendary song, legendary skate song.
They did a wonderful rendition during this lockdown that we had.
I remember them doing that set. That
Yeah,
was fantastic.
lots of cool shit. Suicide Machines, New
Yeah.
Girl, that song.
Hmm.
I've completely forgot about that. The Vandals,
The Vandals are so good, dude.
Primus itself, like
Yeah.
just
No,
going off
they had
Primus.
some weird stuff on there too. Like even Rude, they were like a really odd band.
Yes, yes, but Primus was fucking heavy.
Oh yeah, dude.
Heavy. And I listened to it again and I was like, damn, like this song came out in 1991. I was like 4 years old when this song came out. Jerry was a race car driver. And I was
Yep.
just like, every song that's on this soundtrack is pre 2000 because the game was developed realistically in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And going back and playing it too and seeing the game itself compared to newer renditions like the ones we have with like Session or Skater XL, or even Skate 3 holds up on
Yeah.
certain systems,
Absolutely.
especially Xbox 360 Skate 3. I played it the other day just to go through this.
I mean, skate soundtracks, it's not exclusive to those. Remember, Dave Mira had a killer soundtrack.
Absolutely. I still have Dave Mirror 1, 2, on PlayStation,
Yeah.
and those games had it opened the thing
Dave
about these
Mira
games.
had like Rancid. It was great.
Yeah, the thing about these games, it opened. Granted, I feel like Tony Hawk, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series, was really the game in the franchise that really stamped. Let's add this artistry into this artistry. and on top of it, put it into a video game.
Well, I mean, look at Tony's upbringing, being where he's from and like all the music he grew up on. Dude, skaters were listening to underground music. So why not put a whole soundtrack of underground bands?
Well, yeah, you're taking an entire culture, punk, hardcore, metal, weird alternative.
Weird stuff like alt metal, like Primus.
Yeah, and you're putting it into an alternative culture itself as skateboarding.
Yeah.
It's such a cool thing, and looking back on it this many years back,
Hmm.
24 years now almost, to see that game come out and to be excited about it when I was younger, to be like, "Dude, I can't wait. I'm waiting for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater to come out. Like,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
waiting."
Like there was always an anticipation for a new one, and whether it was going to be good or bad. Like
Yeah.
I just loved how fun it was to play those games.
Do you remember turning on that game, The Ernie's Here and Now? That
Mhm.
song? But I remember it so much because I feel like that song played a lot in the mall level.
It did. Certain songs would play a lot to start off
Yep.
certain stages in that game.
Okay, so speaking of levels, there's the school
Yeah,
in 1 and 2. I used to live right down the street from Point Loma High School. The leap of faith that's there, that the school is modeled off of with Jada
yeah.
Thomas, we all know that he attempted it, landed it, fell, whatever.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, check it
Look
out. A
up
couple.
videos of Jamie Thomas. Look up Bucky Lasek. Look up all those guys. They were the foundations for all the modern shit. And like, yes, skateboarding these days is very impressive. Don't get me wrong, but these are the guys that brought it to the masses originally.
There's tons of dudes in skateboarding. Steve
Yeah.
Cab, all these
Hmm.
guys, Tony Hawkins himself, Danny Way. There's tons of guys, and they're all Southern. A lot of them, most of them are Southern California dudes.
Yep.
Uh, if you ever want to see something in skateboarding history that's still there and not demolished, the leap of faith is still there at
Oh
Point Loma
wow,
High School. And you
that's
can see
sick.
it straight from the street. You can take a picture of it. If you're taking a picture of it while school is in session and you're in your 20s or 30s, you're a fucking creep. But like don't take pictures as high school kids.
Go there on the
Uh
weekend like a
yeah,
normal person.
go there summer vacation on the weekends. Do
Don't be a
something.
fucking creep.
Yeah, but it's still there. It's still there. Nothing's changed from it. They added a couple
That's awesome.
barriers so you can't skate it. Those levels were ingrained in my brain when it comes to the
Mhm.
music. There's bands and songs that you forget that were in these video games. I would love to talk to some of these people and be like, "Why did you choose this or why did you choose that?" It's the same thing with any skateboard video. There's good skateboarding videos like was The End.
I mean, there's always the first CKY video. That was most
Mm,
certainly more of a skateboard based video than the others before they went really unhinged in
yes.
CKY 2K.
Well, CKY2K had a ton of BAM stuff, yeah, for sure. And that was definitely
York.
focusing on the band itself a little bit more, but you still had BAM stuff uh in there, and we'll definitely get to CKY with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3.
Yeah.
System of a Down's War was used as a placeholder track during the early development of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1.
Oh wow.
Mm. And Bruce Willis was supposed to be the main skater. I don't know. I don't know
What?
if Neversoft ever got through the legal hoops of that, but it's an interesting little trivia thing. And Goldfinger's Superman is actually the unofficial theme song of the Tony Hawk franchise, and is often on the top 10 list of memorable and best licensed songs in all of video game history.
I mean, I believe it. It's a very recognizable song. It's a fun song. It's upbeat, everything you can want. But for me, it was always Police Truck. That's just
Yep.
personally to me was all the theme for Tony Hawk was Police Truck.
Yep. Yo, dude, such a good song. I listened to it the other day in preparation for this episode, and I was just like, I gotta listen to it again. I gotta, because the nostalgia that it brought. I was never a Dead Kennedys fan at what 11, 12, 13 years old, and then I heard the Dead Kennedys, and I was like, I like the Dead Kennedys because of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Yeah, pretty much. That was a gateway for me for that band for sure. Because as soon as I found out about them, it was just, I mean, yeah, 99 had a lot of like pivotal moments in music. 99 and 2000.
It was a cultural,
It was a shift.
yeah, cultural shift because for me it was around the same age where I was like, I want to be a musician too.
Same.
So it kind of put me in that mode where it was like, if I'm going to do something creative with skateboarding, but I also like video games, and that's all we had too. We didn't have, we maybe were in the infancy of AOL Instant Messenger, in the infancy of it,
Oh
and
gosh. I mean,
not
I
even
wasn't using any of that stuff at that age.
Napster shit
I
like that.
the most I was doing on my computer at the time was surfing the internet and playing Half-Life.
Beautiful. Oh, Half Life. What a
Yeah,
great one.
the OG.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Bring me to
we get
Black Mesa.
well, I think we will do like an OST episode on other games for sure.
Mm,
We're both video game fanatics and we love soundtracks. We could do movie soundtracks. We could do video game soundtracks. We could do anything, and I think we'll definitely flirt with that idea and do that at some point.
yeah, I mean, like, don't pass it up, man. I'm a huge fan of like just film and video game scores, let alone like just like artists being on a sports soundtrack or something like that. Like original composition will always just be mind blowing to me what some of these guys can create.
There's so much to add to just visual,
Yeah.
and the fact that they did this, like I said before, this franchise really changed alternative sports video games,
Hmm.
but it also changed an entire generation of people because out of all of our friends, every one of our friends that we know that we hold dear was inspired by either one of these two games or one of these four.
Pretty much. And I mean, like, I'll throw some honorable mentions out there, at least for games. I can't really recall as far as for the soundtrack, but the original there was a series called Extreme 1 and 2. Both of those were cool at like extreme sports games. You could
Uh
do
huh.
like luge and all sorts of different stuff. Cool Borders was really
Cool
awesome back in
borders.
the day.
Yep.
That was one of my favorite snowboarding franchises. But yeah, I mean, like we said before, you had like Dave Mira. I think they tried a surfing game that probably didn't go
Kelly
over very
Slater.
well. Yeah. Same studio and everything.
It was just like Tony Hawk, and I honestly think it was Tony Hawk 3 where there was the demo for Kelly Slater Pro Surfer, uh,
Probably.
that had that. Then there was, do you remember the game? It came out around the same time, maybe a little bit, maybe in between Nintendo 64 and PlayStation for Tony Hawk. Thrasher presents Skate and Destroy. Remember Skate and
Yeah.
Destroy? Okay, it was a PlayStation. I think it was original PlayStation game. I think it was on Game Boy Color. Uh, and it had like ragdoll physics,
Yeah.
and it had some really interesting gameplay. Uh,
I like the
and
way you put that.
yeah, and I don't remember the music from it, but I remember the music. I don't know if it was original music or not. I'd have to look into that, but it was such a crazy game for skateboarding. But that time, like when Tony Hawk came out, I mean that's kind of like the biggest thing when Tony Hawk when they re-released 1 and 2 recently,
Mhm.
uh with like a little bit better graphics and on different platforms.
I think they
Um
added some new artists as
I
well,
would imagine. Yeah, I
and not
didn't play it.
but on the offshot, apparently they didn't add all the original songs either.
Oof. That must have been copyright or something like that.
Yeah, it happens, especially because I'm sure it's Activision and they've been through all sorts of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Go listen to Tony Hawk Pro Skater soundtrack. If you don't have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, if you're lucky enough to have a PlayStation 1 and a Nintendo 64 and you're able to play it, not the re-release, go play it. Go to Spotify, go to YouTube, listen to that soundtrack, and just encompass yourself in nostalgic bliss. I guess I could say.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I guess from here we'll move on to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
absolutely.
All right. This also had a killer soundtrack.
Mm.
Oh man, the first song they list on here, "Blood Brothers" by Papa Roach. Such a good riff.
Yes. One of my favorite games ever,
Hmm.
ever. Uh,
It just took what was awesome about the first one, and they just bumped it up in just all the right ways.
Bumped it up a little bit, and realistically, the game came out about a year later, almost like
Hmm.
almost a year.
It was
And
fast.
I don't remember it being that fast as a kid, but it must have been. Maybe a year was longer when I was 12, 13. Uh,
I like to think when you're younger, like time doesn't move nearly as fast as it does when you get into adulthood,
no, no,
especially these days.
no. 2000, I'm not old, but I'm still young. It opened my mind to Rage Against the Machine, Guerrilla Radio.
Mm.
That was a song, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And then I got the Battle of Los Angeles as a CD, through some friend in, I want to say, 8th grade or freshman year of high school, and
Mm.
I still have the same CD. Like, they never picked it up, they never took it back from me. Sorry, friend, I forgot your name, I forgot who it was, uh, but you let me borrow it, and I never gave it back, and I still have it. That opened me up to that. It opened me up to a lot of hip hop too. Getting
Dude,
into
this
that.
had
That was one thing
some
about
of
skateboarding, was it opened
such
me up.
good like hip hop and rap.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
man. It's just like something about the samples they would use. They would be like super chill. Like you could just push and just bob your head.
yep, yeah, and it's what was the song that really got me? Subculture, Styles of Beyond.
Yeah,
That
that's a
was the song,
great song.
and that song, like you said, a lot of songs would come on for certain levels because they're probably programmed to.
It was a jam though.
There was The Hangar, or The Hangar 2, I think it was called,
Yeah.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but that song came out a lot. Oh, You from Bad Religion,
Yeah.
a 1980s song. I mean, believe it or not, you know, is what really became big with the generation that we were. We were young. Our parents might have known it if your parents were young enough. We didn't listen to that stuff, and it's super alternative to our generation. I think we were thrust into it. I'm appreciative of it, especially like collaborations like Bring the Noise with Anthrax and Public Enemy.
That was huge, and that was 91.
91, yeah.
Like, a few years before, you had, you had Aerosmith and, Run DMC doing that, so it just evolved into something, uh,
Dude,
arguably a lot cooler.
91 was the same era as Nirvana.
Yeah.
You're dealing with that. What was the other one? Power Man 5000, When Worlds Collide. What a song.
Banger.
Banger. Absolute
New
banger.
metal banger.
Absolute banger. And I think it's before like new metal was new metal. That was metal at the time. That was rock. That was metal.
New metal, I don't even know exactly when that term started becoming a thing. I know that it
Disturbed.
was more so not even, I remember hearing it in pub that's funny though. I remember like, publications of probably the late 90s calling it new metal and stuff like that, especially after Follow the Leader came out
Yep.
and like Significant Other came out. Like I'm pretty sure it was a term at that point, but a lot of these bands started in the early 90s, but like then it was just alt metal, like with Deftones' first record, Adrenaline, that was
Hmm.
94, 95.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and they were just alt metal. But then again, that term also carried a lot of other bands. You had bands like Faith No More, which arguably I would consider a alt metal band.
Yep.
So like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. Even Primus. They're definitely on the fringe of that.
I guess you're right. I guess you can say realistically that the main new metal bands that created that category, and forgive me if I'm wrong, it's like Limp Bizkit and Korn. I mean, they were really the
They were
new
the
metal
forebearers
wave.
of it for sure.
Yeah, they were part of that first swell of water that was coming up.
Because you had all like Anthrax and Public Enemy, obviously a great example, and even with like the collaboration between Aerosmith and Run DMC, what you were seeing, it was just like, okay, so the mainstream is trying to like fit with the underground, but with Public Enemy, they were the mainstream, and Anthrax was more underground than they were, arguably, especially in '91. So it was kind of cool to see that, but then like it just birthed so many bands because of
There's Evil Eye by Fu Manchu.
it. Yeah.
You know, the record of that one, off the album The Action Is Go,
Hmm.
1997,
Yep.
has a skateboarder on it.
Hmm.
90s skateboarder. I don't know who the skateboarder is, but it ties perfectly in there. And there's a lot of artists that a lot of people don't listen to. Or anymore, or even weren't even that popular. I mean, there's obviously
Yeah.
there's the big ones. There's Papa Roach, there's Anthrax, Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine, Naughty by Nature. There's the
Yeah,
Pen.
I mean, yeah, but the thing is, that's also like really depends on the time you were born in. We
True.
know who Naughty by Nature is.
Yeah.
Most people nowadays, they'll know who Papa Roach is. They're still relevant. They know who
Yep.
Rage is. They're still around. Even I would say, arguably, like Bad Religion, because they've just been in the ether for years. If you're into punk
Rage
rock,
Against the Machine is still relevant. You know.
hmm
Uh.
Fu Manchu, now that's like an obscure one for sure.
Yeah.
Even when they started back in like the '80s.
And then you got other bands like another band that's still touring, Lagwagon.
Lagwagon's awesome, but for me personally, Millencolin was one of my favorite punk rock bands. I think they were like from Sweden, if I remember correct.
That's funny that you say that because in
They were,
'99,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tony Hawk had an interview about this game, the second
Hmm.
one, and he said his favorite song in the game was "No Cigar" by Millencolin. So,
That was honestly like my favorite track on there. Like it
mm,
was that, like Blood Brothers, Rage is a given. Because I'd been, even at that point, I had been listening to Rage since the first like Evil Empire or like self-titled.
let's face it, Papa Roach's album "Infest" was, if not still, one of the best albums of our generation. Uh,
It absolutely was, and then that same year, you also had, or may have been a year before, but I'm pretty sure same year, Hybrid Theory also came out.
I believe Linkin Park was definitely on the forefront. I mean, Limp Bizkit, Korn, they were all dropping
Hmm.
big records. Deftones, they were all dropping big records. Foo Fighters were still, massive coming through
Oh
that time.
man, 2001, White Pony.
Oh, what a record, dude.
Yep.
Let me be completely honest. I don't remember the last Tony Hawk game I played. Once Skate came out, I kind of fell off the franchise
I
and start
remember playing Underground.
yeah, Underground and Underground 2 for sure. Where you're able to, I think was it Underground where you start in some like janky New Jersey town and
Yeah,
yeah.
when they
Yeah.
added like a storyline to it. I remember the last one I played that I can recall, Jason Lee was like the main uh person that was helping you out in the game,
Mm, was that
which was
Underground 2
amazing. Possibly.
or Underground 3? I don't remember how many they made. Like I said, I fell off. Skate 3 is one of my favorite skateboard games that ever came out and still is to this day. I do enjoy Skater XL and Session and those games that are very similar.
Ooh, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but the more arcade style game like Tony Hawk has always been fun. And, like we've been saying, this whole theme of this episode, without the 30 or so songs that have come out with these two games, my vocabulary of music would be a lot different without these games.
Yeah, I can say that because I mean, I don't know. If you look at it in reference to the times we live in now, like especially when it comes to soundtracks, I would say there's usually like an overarching theme with like, okay, this is urban, so we're gonna go hip hop strictly, or like this is like some games, like sports games. Obviously, they could still mess around with it, but the caliber of music that they even use in sports games now is questionable.
Top 40.
Yeah, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Then again, the broader audience of people who consume that, I'm sure, are listening to top 40. But the thing is like there are people who are our age playing that music. It could give less of a shit. So there's a generational gap, and they have to make decisions based on their core audience and who they're trying to appeal to and sell to. So, like, it's the music's not necessarily always for us. This music, though, this was definitely for me.
Put it this way, for an example, let's go Nintendo 64.
Hmm.
Uh, NHL 98 in Nintendo 64. 1 year before Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 came out. All of the music on NHL 98 was original EA music. Uh, another example, Road Rash 64.
Oh
Uh,
wow, Road Rash.
Crazy, weird, the weirdest rock music you could ever put on. But it was all original. Some of
Yep.
it. Actually, one of the songs, fun fact, one of the songs from Road Rash is original. I want to say it's original Sugar Ray. And I could be wrong, but this is years and years of me being told this.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
I think in the 90s, especially the late 90s with video games, I think the production of these games were a lot different. Now you have marketing departments, which they definitely had then. I feel like more so they had the skateboarders that were a part of Tony Hawk 1 and Tony Hawk 2 say, "Hey, what are 5 songs you'd like to see on this?" I think there was more a collaborative effort between the actual athletes and the artistry of the game compared to now if you have, NHL 23, or NHL 24, it's all
Yeah.
top 40
Yeah.
because that's the way EA works now. I think some of these studios were definitely more apt to using that, but it's a testament to the time where you're using the actual people you're building this product off of and
Yes,
their
at one
influence.
point in time, they actually gave a shit about their consumer base.
Yes. Yes, it wasn't, I mean, it was always dollars, but
No, no, no. There was always dollars, but they were
absolutely.
smart.
But I think they understood their consumer base better.
They did well, definitely more so than now.
Yeah.
Studios just like to piss people off these days.
Yep.
We promise this game's going to come out on this day. 2 years later, here's the revision date.
We're 10 years out of GTA 5 and they're still dropping, updates. They're flirting with GTA 6 and it's going to be probably a Florida based game. And
Perfect.
what the
Perfect.
rumblings I'm seeing look good. But that's another one we can talk about music, man. GTA soundtracks. Woo
Oh
wee.
yeah, I just got the old GTA collection for the Switch, so it's 3 Vice City and San Andreas.
Good
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, that's a
Especially Vice City.
so much good music on both of those, to be honest.
And a lot of it's original music too, which is so cool to see. But yeah, Tony Hawk 1 and 2, friends, listeners, if you have a favorite song, please let us know. Um, I'm going to start jamming to a lot of these songs again. I'm going to bust out the Nintendo 64 and start playing Tony Hawk again just for this. And do you have anything final words about Tony Hawk 1 or 2?
I'll say this, and I'll go out on, I think, my musical, kind of like the way you put it, your musical vocabulary. Like, for me, it's just like, this was music of my formative years of finding out like what music I actually liked that wasn't stuff that I was just consuming from a television, radio, parents, whatever. This was stuff that resonated with me, and I think that's what I take from these the most. Is like, because I really love the stuff music my dad listened to. I love the music both of my brothers listened to, and I had one brother that was super into like hip hop, and like No Limit was huge then, and like then my other brother was into like more heavier stuff, and like all of his friends were everything in between, so like I was exposed to a lot of music in this time period, and I just remember these soundtracks just being the anthem of that time for me, and I'm super happy they exist.
I'm super happy that we existed during their release.
Absolutely.
It's a great thing. Whatever new Tony Hawk games you play, go back, play the old ones. If you got an older sibling, a parent that owns a system, fucking play it.
you could probably still get the old ones on PS Plus, I'd imagine, or
Yeah,
like any of those. Like you can probably find them for cheap.
yeah.
But either way, like seek it out. You may not get something out of it, but you'll at least get an idea of like what we were dealing with back then, and like you know, it was a really cool time.
You get an idea of what the skateboarders of the time were listening to.
Absolutely, for sure.
That's really the ultimate is what these guys were listening to and what the studio Activision Neversoft, uh, the developers of whatever music department was there, listened to these guys and picked the best tracks they could. And it blew up some of these bands. Some of these bands would not have had the success that they had without probably a release in a video game.
Imagine the sales boom alone that Kennedys got.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they were defunct as a band at that point
For
for like
years.
years.
Years. Yeah. And then seeing the publicity in the limelight of a band like Powerman 5000 got just because of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Yeah.
So, you know, other connections. Guys, listen to the soundtrack, bump it, freak new people out. More importantly, freak old people out, bump
Keep them
it.
on their toes.
Yep.
That's all we ask.
And then when they ask, "Oh, this newfangled music," you go, "No, this is 30 years old." You just shove it down their throats. So guys, thank you for joining us. Join us for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, an episode that's coming up in the future. We don't have a date on it yet. We will let you know when it comes out. And we will be joined by our favorite guest, our percussion expert from the band Bearing Point, Colin Otwell, will be back. And we can't wait to keep this series going. We are probably going to go throughout most of the Tony Hawk games. I wouldn't say all, but most. We'll go through at least until 4, I'd say.
At the very least, we'll
At
see
the
how it
very
goes
least.
from there.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So thank you guys for hanging out with us.
Thanks again for tuning in for another episode of Tales from the Soundcheck podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Tales from the Soundcheck podcast and listen on Spotify where you can follow and rate the show.
Don't forget to hit that little bell and subscribe to our YouTube channel for full episodes and future exclusive clips.
If you have any comments, want to chat with us on the show, or have your band featured, please DM us or email us at talesfromthesoundcheckpodcast@gmail.com.